The year was 2287, and humanity had spread across 17 star systems, building gleaming orbital colonies and terraformed settlements on distant worlds. The Central Governance Station, a massive hexagonal structure floating in the gravitational balance point between Earth and Luna, served as the political heart of human civilization. Its chrome-plated corridors reflected the cold blue light of holographic displays, where delegates from every inhabited system gathered to debate treaties, trade agreements, and the ever-present question of defense. For 3 generations, humanity had lived with a shadow hanging over its achievements. The Zephyrians, an ancient, highly advanced species, had maintained a presence at the edges of human space, observing but never engaging. Their vessels, organic in appearance and impossibly large, drifted through the void like living mountains. No human had ever seen a Zephyrian face to face and survived to describe the encounter with certainty. Commander Elena Reeves stood at the observation deck of Horizon Station, the furthest human outpost in the Perseus arm of the galaxy. She watched the stars with tired eyes, her reflection ghostly in the reinforced transparent aluminum viewport. At 42 years old, she had spent half her life in space, rising through the ranks of the Exploration Corps to command this remote facility. Her dark hair was pulled back in a regulation bun, streaked with premature gray from years of stress and responsibility. "Commander, we're receiving another transmission," Lieutenant Omar Khatib announced from the communications station, his voice tight with barely controlled anxiety. The young officer had only been stationed at Horizon for 6 months, and the isolation was beginning to show in the dark circles under his eyes. Elena turned from the viewport, her boots clicking against the metallic floor as she approached the holographic display table at the center of the operations room. "Same source?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. "Affirmative. The signature matches the Zephyrian flagship that's been holding position at the system's edge for the past 72 hours, Omar replied, his fingers dancing across the touch-sensitive interface to bring up the data. The hologram materialized above the table, a massive vessel that resembled a nautilus shell, its spiral chambers glowing with bioluminescent pulses. Dr. Yuki Tanaka, the station's chief xenolinguist, hurried into the operations room, her tablet clutched against her chest. She was a slight woman in her mid-30s, with intense dark eyes that rarely blinked when she was focused on a problem. "I've been analyzing the signal structure," she said, slightly breathless. "It's definitely a communication attempt, not a threat assessment scan. They're trying to establish a dialogue protocol. After 3 generations of silence. Why now?" Elena wondered aloud, studying the alien vessel's image with a mixture of fascination and dread. Every child in human space had grown up with stories of the Zephyrians. Some painted them as benevolent observers, others as patient predators waiting for the right moment to strike. "Perhaps they've decided we're finally worth talking to," offered Science Officer David Park, a lanky man with nervous hands that were always adjusting his glasses. "Or perhaps they've decided we're finally dangerous enough that they can't ignore us anymore." The holographic display flickered, and a new image replaced the vessel schematic. It showed a figure that made everyone in the operations room fall silent. The being stood upright on 2 legs, but there, the resemblance to humans ended. Its body was covered in overlapping plates of a chitinous substance that shimmered with an opalescent sheen, shifting between deep purples and midnight blues. The head was elongated and elegant, with 3 luminous eyes arranged in a triangular pattern. Most striking were the translucent structures extending from its shoulders and back. Not quite wings, not quite fins, but something that seemed to pulse with its own internal light. "Is that their leader?" Omar asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Yuki was frantically cross-referencing the image with the Exploration Corps' xenobiology database. "The morphology matches theoretical projections of a Zephyrian matriarch," she said, her voice trembling slightly with excitement and fear. According to the limited intelligence we've gathered, their society is structured around a monarchy of sorts. If this is who I think it is, we're looking at Queen Velsarith, the ruler of the entire Zephyrian collective. The name sent a chill through the room. Queen Velsarith was a legend in human intelligence circles, a figure of such power and mystery that some analysts believed she was more myth than reality. Reports suggested she had ruled the Zephyrians for over 200 Earth years, expanding their territory across a dozen star systems and establishing them as one of the dominant powers in this sector of the galaxy. She's requesting permission to board Horizon Station, Omar announced, looking up from his console with wide eyes. Alone. Alone? Elena repeated, certain she had misheard. An alien monarch wants to board a human military installation, without guards, without escort. That's what the transmission indicates, Yuki confirmed, studying her tablet with a furrowed brow. She's even provided specifications for environmental compatibility. Apparently, Zephyrians can tolerate our atmosphere with minimal discomfort. Commander, this is unprecedented. This could be the most significant moment in human-alien relations since we first detected extraterrestrial intelligence. Elena felt the weight of the decision pressing down on her shoulders. Every regulation, every protocol in the Exploration Corps manual screamed at her to refuse, to maintain defensive posture, to contact central governance and wait for instructions that would take weeks to arrive across the vast distances of space. But something in the image of Queen Velsarith, in the careful precision of her communication attempts, suggested this was a singular opportunity that might never come again. Send a response, Elena said slowly, choosing each word with care. Tell Queen Velsarith that Horizon Station welcomes her in the spirit of peaceful exchange. Provide coordinates for Docking Bay 3. It's our largest facility, and we can control the environmental conditions more precisely there. Over the next 6 hours, the station transformed into a frenzy of preparation. Engineering teams worked to modify Docking Bay 3, installing additional atmospheric regulators and ensuring that every safety system was functioning at peak efficiency. Medical staff prepared quarantine protocols, though Yuki insisted that the biochemical scans suggested Zephyrians and humans posed minimal cross-contamination risk to each other. Security personnel established discreet positions throughout the bay, armed but under strict orders to maintain a non-threatening posture. Elena changed from her standard uniform into full-dress regalia, the dark blue fabric crisp and adorned with the silver insignia of her rank and service medals earned over 2 decades of exploration. She studied herself in the mirror of her quarters, wondering if anything in her training had prepared her for this moment. First contact protocols existed certainly, but they were theoretical frameworks designed by committee, not practical guides for facing the queen of an alien empire. "You look terrified," came a voice from the doorway. Dr. Marcus Webb, the station's chief medical officer and Elena's closest friend aboard Horizon, leaned against the frame with his characteristic half-smile. He was a few years older than Elena, with graying temples and the kind of steady presence that made people trust him instinctively. "I am terrified," Elena admitted, adjusting her collar one final time. "Everything we do in the next few hours could determine the course of human history. No pressure, right?" "You've handled worse," Marcus said, though his expression suggested he wasn't entirely convinced. "Remember the reactor failure on Kepler Station? You kept 4,000 people alive with nothing but emergency batteries and sheer stubbornness." "That was engineering and physics," Elena countered. I don't even know what this is. Diplomacy, anthropology, gambling with the survival of our species? All of the above, probably," Marcus said with a shrug. "But if anyone can navigate this, it's you. Just remember, at the end of the day, even an alien queen is still a person with motivations, fears, and goals. Find the common ground." The station's communication system chimed with a priority alert. "Commander Reeves to Docking Bay 3, Omar's voice echoed through the corridors. "The Zephyrian vessel is approaching. Elena took one last deep breath, squared her shoulders, and headed for the docking bay, Marcus falling into step beside her. They moved through Horizon's corridors, past observation windows that showed the infinite expanse of space and the distant glow of a red dwarf star that served as this system's sun. Other personnel stopped and watched them pass, their faces reflecting the same mixture of hope and fear that Elena felt churning in her own chest. Docking Bay 3 was the size of a small city block, designed to accommodate cargo freighters and exploration vessels. The massive space had been cleared, leaving only a landing platform at its center, surrounded by the discreet security positions and observation posts. The bay's exterior doors, thick plates of reinforced alloy, began to cycle open, revealing the star-strewn darkness beyond. The Zephyrian shuttle was unlike any human craft Elena had ever seen. It wasn't built. It appeared to have been grown, its hull a seamless organic structure that pulsed with the same bioluminescent glow as the flagship. The vessel was roughly the size of a standard personnel transport, but where human ships were all sharp angles and functional design, this craft moved with an almost liquid grace, flowing through the magnetic fields that guided it to the landing platform. There was no mechanical hiss of hydraulics, no grinding of metal on metal. The shuttle simply settled onto the platform like a living thing coming to rest, its bioluminescent patterns dimming to a soft, steady glow. For a long moment, nothing happened. Elena could hear her own heartbeat pounding in her ears, could feel the eyes of every person in the docking bay fixed on that alien craft. Then, with a motion so smooth it seemed almost liquid, a section of the shuttle's hull retracted, forming an opening through which a figure emerged. Queen Velsarith stepped onto human territory for the first time in recorded history. She was even more imposing in person than her holographic image had suggested, standing at least 7 feet tall. Her chitinous plates caught and refracted the docking bay's lights, creating shifting patterns of color across her form. The translucent structures extending from her shoulders and back unfurled slightly, revealing intricate vein-like patterns through which some kind of luminous fluid seemed to flow. Her 3 eyes, each the size of a human fist, focused on Elena with an intelligence that was immediately undeniably present. Elena stepped forward, her military training keeping her movements measured and controlled despite the adrenaline flooding her system. She stopped at what she hoped was a respectful distance, close enough to demonstrate peaceful intent, far enough to avoid any perception of aggression. "Queen Velsarith," Elena said, her voice steady and clear in the vast space of the docking bay. "On behalf of humanity and the Exploration Corps, I welcome you to Horizon Station. I am Commander Elena Reeves." For a moment, the alien queen simply regarded her with those 3 luminous eyes. Then from somewhere within her chitinous form came a sound, a series of harmonics that started as a low vibration and built into something that resembled music more than language. It was beautiful and alien and utterly incomprehensible. Yuki stepped forward quickly, holding out a translation device that the station's linguistics team had frantically programmed based on the earlier transmissions. Queen Velsarith's eyes shifted to regard the xenolinguist, and after a moment's pause, she accepted the device with a delicate manipulation of appendages that Elena hadn't even noticed until they moved. The queen attached the device to a section of her chitinous plating, and when she spoke again, the harmonics were accompanied by a synthesized voice through the translator, feminine, measured, with an accent that couldn't be placed anywhere in human linguistic space. "Commander Reeves," the translated voice said, and there was something in the tone that Elena couldn't quite identify. "I thank you for receiving me. I come before you not as a conqueror, not as a superior intelligence bestowing wisdom upon a lesser species. I come as a supplicant, carrying a burden that has grown too heavy for me to bear alone." The words hung in the air of the docking bay, and Elena felt her carefully prepared diplomatic responses evaporate. This wasn't what anyone had expected. A request for alliance, perhaps, or a territorial negotiation, or even a threat. But this, "You honor us with your presence, Your Majesty," Elena said carefully, falling back on formal protocols, while her mind raced to understand what was happening. "Horizon Station's resources are at your disposal. How may we assist you?" Queen Velsarith's 3 eyes seemed to dim slightly, and the bioluminescent patterns across her form shifted to deeper, darker hues. When she spoke again, there was a weight to the words that transcended the mechanical translation. "I come to ask forgiveness," the Queen said, and in that moment, the entire trajectory of human-Zephyrian relations shifted on an axis that no one had predicted. "For sins committed long before your kind reached for the stars, for actions taken in arrogance and ignorance, and for consequences that have haunted me across 2 centuries of your time. I come to ask forgiveness from one who cannot possibly understand the depth of my transgression, but who represents the only hope I have for redemption." Elena found herself at a complete loss. First contact protocols had prepared her for many scenarios, but the spectacle of an alien queen, feared across 17 star systems, asking for forgiveness was nowhere in the manual. She glanced at Yuki, who looked equally stunned, then at Marcus, who gave her a subtle nod of encouragement. "Perhaps," Elena said slowly, "we should speak in private, Your Majesty. There is much I do not understand, and I sense this is a conversation that deserves time and careful attention." Queen Velsarith's form seemed to relax slightly, the rigid posture softening almost imperceptibly. "Your wisdom honors your species, Commander. I accept your offer. But I must warn you, the story I carry is one of horror and loss, and once you hear it, you may wish you had refused me entry to your station." "Then let us face that possibility together," Elena replied, surprising herself with the steadiness in her voice. "Horizon Station has a diplomatic suite prepared. Will you accompany me?" The alien queen inclined her elongated head in what might have been a gesture of agreement or respect. As they walked together across the docking bay, an alien monarch and a human commander, neither could have predicted how this meeting would transform not just their own understanding, but the future of 2 species learning to navigate the vast and complicated darkness between the stars. The diplomatic suite aboard Horizon Station had been designed with flexibility in mind, capable of adapting to various atmospheric requirements and cultural expectations. Elena had ordered it configured for standard human comfort, with the addition of environmental controls that could adjust if Queen Velsarith required different conditions. The room was elegant in its simplicity, a circular space with a holographic display table at its center, comfortable seating arranged around it, and viewports that offered a panoramic view of the star system. Queen Velsarith stood at one of the viewports, her 3 eyes focused on the distant glow of the red dwarf that illuminated this corner of space. Her bioluminescent patterns had settled into a slow, rhythmic pulse that Elena was beginning to interpret as a kind of contemplative state. Marcus and Yuki had accompanied them, with Elena's permission and the Queen's acceptance, witnesses to history and perhaps, Elena thought, emotional support for whatever revelation was about to unfold. "Your star is dying," Queen Velsarith observed, her translated voice quiet in the diplomatic suite's acoustically balanced space. "Not immediately, not within your lifetime, or even your species' current span of expansion, but in cosmic terms, it flickers toward its end." "All stars die eventually," Elena replied, moving to stand near the viewport but at a respectful distance from the alien queen. "It's the nature of the universe." "Indeed," the Queen agreed, turning her attention from the viewport to focus her 3 luminous eyes on Elena. "And yet, knowing this truth does not make witnessing it any less profound. Everything ends, Commander Reeves. Civilizations, species, even the stars themselves. The question that has consumed me for 2 of your centuries is whether redemption is possible before that ending arrives." Elena gestured toward the seating area. "Please, Your Majesty, make yourself comfortable. You spoke of seeking forgiveness for actions taken long ago. I confess that I and my companions are eager to understand what brings you to us with such a burden." The Queen moved with surprising grace for such a large being, settling into a position that wasn't quite sitting, but seemed to serve the same purpose. Her translucent wing-like structures folded against her back, and the chitinous plates of her form adjusted with minute precision. Elena, Marcus, and Yuki took seats opposite her, the holographic display table between them creating a neutral space that belonged to neither human nor Zephyrian. "Before I begin," Queen Velsarith said, "I must ask that you understand. What I am about to share has been a closely guarded secret within the Zephyrian Collective. My advisors, my military commanders, even members of my own family believe I have come here to assess your species' threat potential or to negotiate territorial boundaries. Only I know the true purpose of this meeting, and only I bear the weight of the knowledge I am about to impart." "We will honor your confidence," Elena assured her, glancing at Marcus and Yuki, who both nodded in agreement. "Whatever you share with us will remain within this room unless you grant permission otherwise." The Queen's bioluminescent patterns shifted to deeper shades, almost approaching darkness. 187 of your years ago," she began, "I was not yet queen. I was—" "The closest translation in your language would be crown princess, though the Zephyrian concept carries additional layers of meaning involving military command and scientific leadership. My mother ruled the collective with wisdom accumulated over 4 centuries, but she was growing weary, and the mantle of leadership was beginning to pass to me." Yuki leaned forward slightly, her xenolinguist's fascination evident despite the gravity of the moment. "Your species has considerably longer lifespans than humans," she observed. "We do," the Queen confirmed. "On average, a Zephyrian of the royal bloodline can expect to live 600 to 700 of your years, barring accident or illness. It is both a blessing and a curse. We accumulate great wisdom, but also great regret, and we have many more years in which to dwell upon our failures." She paused, her 3 eyes seeming to lose focus as if looking into a past only she could see. "In those days, the Zephyrian Collective was expanding aggressively across this sector of space. We believed ourselves superior to all other sentient species we encountered, more technologically advanced, more culturally sophisticated, more deserving of the galaxy's resources. It was arrogance of the highest order, and I embodied it perhaps more than any other member of my generation." Marcus shifted uncomfortably. "This sounds like a familiar story," he said quietly. "Humanity has its own long history of colonization and the suffering it caused. Then perhaps your species will understand my burden better than I hoped," Queen Velsarith replied. "We encountered a species we called the Talven. Your databases may know them by other names or not at all, for we erased most evidence of their existence. They were remarkable beings, not as technologically advanced as Zephyrians, but possessing an innate connection to the electromagnetic fields that permeate space. They could navigate without instruments, communicate across vast distances without technology, and their art, Commander, their art was so beautiful it could make even a hardened warrior weep." The Queen's form seemed to contract slightly, as if the memory caused physical pain. "Their homeworld, which they called Talvenkor, orbited a yellow star, not unlike your Earth's sun, in a system rich with rare minerals that the Zephyrian Collective desired for our expanding fleet. We sent diplomatic envoys first, offering trade agreements, technological exchange, integration into the Collective. The Talven refused. They were a peaceful species, yes, but also fiercely independent. They did not want our technology, did not want our presence in their system, and made it clear that they would resist any attempt at colonization." Elena felt a cold dread beginning to form in her stomach. "What happened?" she asked, though part of her already knew the answer. "I argued before the Royal Council that the Talven's refusal was an insult to the Collective, a rejection of our obvious superiority that could not be tolerated," Queen Velsarith said, and her translated voice carried a weight of self-loathing that transcended species. I was young, arrogant, and convinced that I understood the universe and our place in it. I proposed a military solution. Not extermination, I told myself, but forced integration. We would occupy their system, take control of their resources, and gradually absorb the Talvan into our collective. Any resistance would be met with overwhelming force. The diplomatic suite had grown very quiet. Even the soft hum of the station's life support system seemed distant. My mother opposed the plan, the Queen continued. She had lived long enough to know that conquest built on force never endures, that it breeds resentment and eventual rebellion. But I was persuasive, and the younger members of the Royal Council supported me. We convinced my mother that a show of strength was necessary, that allowing the Talvan to refuse us would encourage other species to do the same. Eventually, with great reluctance, she gave her consent. Queen Velsarith stood abruptly, moving back to the viewport as if she could no longer bear to face the humans while speaking her next words. The military campaign lasted 3 of your months. The Talvan resisted with every resource they possessed, fighting not for conquest, but for survival. They were brave, resourceful, and utterly outmatched. Our weapons were more advanced, our tactics refined over centuries of warfare. When the fighting ended, 2/3 of the Talvan population was dead. Their cities were ruins. Their electromagnetic communication network, the very thing that defined their species, was shattered beyond repair. "Dear God," Marcus whispered. But even that was not the full extent of the horror, the Queen said, and Elena could see her form trembling, the bioluminescent patterns flickering erratically. In the aftermath of the occupation, I was placed in charge of the integration process. I ordered the surviving Talvan relocated from their ancestral homeworld to work facilities throughout the system. I separated families, suppressed their cultural practices, and forced them to adopt Zephyrian technology and methods. I told myself I was civilizing them, bringing them the benefits of our superior culture. In truth, I was destroying everything that made them who they were. Yuki had tears streaming down her face. How many survived?" she asked. By the time I realized the magnitude of what I had done, fewer than 10,000 Talvan remained from an original population of nearly 4 million, Queen Velsarith replied, her voice barely above a whisper through the translator. And even those survivors were shadows of what their species had been, broken, traumatized, stripped of the culture and identity that had defined them for millennia. My mother died shortly after, some say, from the shame of what we had done. I ascended to the throne with blood on my hands and the ghosts of the Talvan haunting my conscience. She turned back to face the humans, and Elena could see that her 3 eyes had changed color, shifting to a dark, almost black hue that suggested profound grief. "For 187 years, I have ruled the Zephyrian collective. I have spent that time trying to atone for my sins. I abolished forced integration policies. I established protections for less advanced species. I redirected our expansion from conquest to genuine diplomatic cooperation. I even returned control of the Talvan system to the survivors, though so few remained that it felt like a hollow gesture. But it wasn't enough," Elena said softly, beginning to understand the depth of the burden the Queen carried. "It was never enough," Queen Velsarith confirmed. "How could it be? No amount of good governance, no policy reform, no charitable act could bring back the millions I destroyed. I have lived nearly 2 centuries carrying this weight, and it has not diminished. If anything, it has grown heavier with each passing year, each moment of wisdom that shows me more clearly the enormity of what I did." Marcus cleared his throat. "Your Majesty, I hope this doesn't sound insensitive, but why are you telling us this? Humanity wasn't involved in these events. We weren't even a space-faring species when this tragedy occurred. What forgiveness could we possibly offer?" The Queen's bioluminescent patterns stabilized somewhat, shifting to a pattern that Elena was beginning to recognize as determination. 12 of your years ago, Zephyrian scouts detected the early expansion of human civilization beyond your home system. We have been observing you since then, watching as your species spreads across the stars. And I have seen something in humanity that gives me hope. You carry your own history of terrible mistakes, of colonization and oppression, yet you acknowledge these sins. You teach your children about them. You build memorials to the victims. You struggle imperfectly but genuinely to do better. She moved closer to the holographic table, her 3 eyes fixed on Elena with an intensity that was almost overwhelming. 3 years ago, I intercepted a transmission from Earth, a broadcast of a ceremony commemorating victims of a genocide that occurred in your 20th century. I watched human leaders publicly acknowledge their predecessors' crimes, saw descendants of perpetrators asking forgiveness from descendants of victims. It was imperfect, yes, full of political complications and incomplete justice. But it was an attempt at accountability, at facing the darkness of the past rather than hiding from it. "And you want," Elena began, struggling to articulate what she was beginning to understand. "I want to know if redemption is possible," Queen Velsarith said, her voice carrying a rawness that the mechanical translator couldn't quite smooth away. "Not redemption granted by my own species. They view the Talvan incident as an unfortunate episode in our past, a mistake corrected by subsequent policy reforms. Most Zephyrians have forgotten the Talvan entirely, or remember them only as a historical footnote. But you, Commander Reeves, you represent a species that understands the weight of historical sin, that grapples with the question of how to move forward while honoring the memory of those who suffered." Elena felt the full weight of what was being asked of her settling onto her shoulders. This wasn't a diplomatic negotiation or a military standoff. This was a profoundly personal plea from a being who had carried guilt across nearly 2 centuries, seeking some kind of absolution from a species that had no direct connection to her crimes. "Your Majesty," Elena said carefully, "I am deeply honored that you would share this with us, and I cannot imagine the courage it took to face your past so directly. But I need you to understand, I don't have the authority to grant forgiveness on behalf of the Talvan. That right belongs only to those who suffered and their descendants." "I know," the Queen replied. "The surviving Talvan number fewer than 5,000 now, scattered across the galaxy, and most want nothing to do with me or any Zephyrian. I have tried to reach out to them, to offer what restitution I can, but my very presence causes them pain. I cannot undo what I did. I cannot bring back the dead. I cannot restore their culture or their world to what it was. All I can do is ask, from a species that understands guilt and the need for atonement, is redemption possible for one who has caused such suffering? Or am I doomed to carry this burden until my life finally ends?" The diplomatic suite fell into a profound silence. Elena looked at Marcus and Yuki, seeing her own emotional turmoil reflected in their faces. This wasn't a question that could be answered with diplomatic protocols or military strategy. It was a question of morality, of justice, of what it meant to acknowledge terrible wrongs and somehow continue existing in the universe. "I think," Elena said slowly, choosing each word with the care it deserved, "that redemption is not something that can be granted by others. Not fully, not in a way that erases guilt or makes the past acceptable. What happened to the Talvan was a profound injustice, and nothing can change that truth. But I also think that redemption is a process, not a destination. It's found in the continuous choice to acknowledge what was done, to face it honestly, and to ensure that such horrors are never repeated." Queen Velsarith's 3 eyes brightened slightly. "You believe it is possible, then, for one such as me?" "I believe that the fact you are here, that you have carried this burden for so long and refused to forget or minimize it, says something important," Elena replied. "Many leaders throughout history have committed terrible acts and then spent the rest of their lives justifying them, rewriting the narrative to make themselves the hero. You have done the opposite. You have spent nearly 2 centuries ensuring that the Talvan are not forgotten, that their suffering meant something, that the policies that enabled their destruction were changed. That doesn't erase what happened, but it is the work of redemption. Marcus spoke up, his medical training perhaps giving him insight into the nature of healing, physical and otherwise. In human psychology, we have learned that guilt serves a purpose, he said gently. It's meant to change behavior, to prevent us from repeating harmful actions. But guilt that never leads to change, or that continues even after genuine amends have been made, becomes destructive rather than constructive. Your Majesty, you have changed. The evidence is clear in how you have governed, in the policies you have implemented, in the very fact that you are here seeking accountability rather than hiding from it. Yuki added her own perspective, her voice still shaky with emotion, but growing stronger. In many human cultures, there is a concept of bearing witness, of ensuring that victims are remembered, that their stories are told, that their suffering is acknowledged. By carrying the memory of the Talvan for all these years, by refusing to let them be forgotten, you have been bearing witness. It is not enough to undo what was done, but it is something. It matters. Queen Velsarith was silent for a long moment, her bioluminescent patterns shifting through a complex sequence of colors that might have represented profound emotion. When she finally spoke, her translated voice carried a note that might have been the beginning of something like hope. I came to Horizon Station expecting judgment, perhaps even condemnation, she said. I would have accepted either. What I did not expect was understanding, or the suggestion that my efforts at atonement, inadequate as they are, might constitute a path forward. You have given me something I did not think possible, Commander Reeves, not absolution, for that is not yours to grant, and I am not certain I deserve it, but perhaps permission to continue the work of redemption without the crushing certainty that it is futile. Elena stood and approached the alien queen, stopping at a distance that felt respectful but not distant. Your Majesty, I cannot speak for the Talvan or claim to understand the full depth of their suffering, but I can speak as a human who has studied our own history of terrible mistakes. The path forward is not found in forgetting what was done or in punishing ourselves to the point of dysfunction, but in remembering, in learning, and in ensuring that we build something better from the ashes of what was destroyed. You have been doing that work for nearly 2 centuries. Perhaps it is time to recognize that the work itself is the redemption you seek. The Queen extended one of her delicate appendages, and after a moment's hesitation, Elena reached out her hand to meet it. The contact was brief, but in that moment, across the vast gulf that separated their species, 2 beings touched in mutual recognition of the weight of history and the possibility of healing. Thank you, Queen Velsarith said simply, for listening, for understanding, for suggesting that redemption is a journey rather than a destination. I will carry your words with me, Commander Reeves, and I hope they will make the burden easier to bear. As the diplomatic meeting concluded and preparations were made for Queen Velsarith's departure, Elena found herself standing at the viewport, watching the alien queen's shuttle prepare to leave Horizon Station. Marcus joined her, placing a companionable hand on her shoulder. That was the most extraordinary conversation I have ever witnessed, he said quietly. It was the most extraordinary conversation I hope to ever have, Elena replied. The weight of what she carries, I can't even imagine. Do you think it helped, what we told her? Elena watched as the organic shuttle lifted gracefully from the docking bay and began its journey back to the massive Zephyrian flagship waiting at the system's edge. I think she came here seeking permission to believe that redemption was possible, and we gave her that. Whether it truly helps, whether it eases her burden in any meaningful way, only time will tell. But at least she knows she is not alone in grappling with historical sins and the question of how to move forward. And what about us? Marcus asked. How do we move forward after this? It was a profound question, and one that Elena knew would occupy her thoughts for years to come. First contact with an alien species had always been imagined as a moment of wonder, of scientific discovery, of humanity taking its place among the stars. No one had predicted it would come in the form of an alien queen seeking forgiveness for crimes committed before humans had even left their own solar system. "I think," Alina said slowly, "we honor what she shared with us by continuing to grapple with our own history, by remembering that we too carry the weight of historical sins, that we too must choose every day whether to repeat the mistakes of the past or build something better, and by recognizing that redemption for individuals, for species, for civilizations is always possible as long as we are willing to face our failures honestly and do the hard work of change." The shuttle disappeared into the darkness of space, its bioluminescent glow fading until it was just another point of light among the countless stars. Alina remained at the viewport for a long time afterward, contemplating the strange and profound gift that Queen Velsarith had given humanity, not advanced technology, not territorial agreements, not military alliance, but something far more valuable. The reminder that acknowledging one's failures and striving for redemption was a universal struggle, one that transcended species, culture, and the vast distances between the stars. In the years that followed, the meeting between Commander Alina Reeves and Queen Velsarith would become a pivotal moment in human-Zephyrian relations. Formal diplomatic channels would open, cultural exchanges would begin, and two species that had once viewed each other with fear and suspicion would start the slow, careful work of building understanding. But for Alina, the true significance of that day would always be personal. The moment when she witnessed profound guilt, genuine atonement, and the universal hope that redemption might be possible, even for the gravest of sins. And somewhere in the vast expanse of space, on what remained of Talven Core, the few thousand survivors of a nearly destroyed species would eventually learn of their queen's confession and her search for redemption. Their responses would be complex, varied, and deeply personal, some finding a measure of closure in her acknowledgement of their suffering, others unable or unwilling to offer any form of forgiveness. But they would know, at least, that they had not been forgotten, that their stories had been told, and that an alien species called humanity had listened and borne witness to their pain. In the end, perhaps that was all redemption could ever truly be, the continuous choice to remember, to acknowledge, and to ensure that suffering serves as a teacher rather than merely a tragedy. Queen Velsarith would carry her burden for the remainder of her centuries-long life, but she would carry it with the knowledge that the work of atonement was meaningful, that change was possible, and that even across the infinite darkness between stars, beings could reach out to one another in shared recognition of both the capacity for terrible harm and the possibility of healing. 10 years after the historic meeting at Horizon Station, the relationship between humans and Zephyrians had evolved into one of the galaxy's most productive interspecies partnerships. Cultural exchange programs flourished, with human students learning the intricate bioluminescent art forms of the Zephyrians, while alien scholars immersed themselves in humanity's diverse musical traditions. Joint scientific expeditions explored uncharted regions of space, combining human innovation with Zephyrian biological technology in ways that benefited both civilizations. Commander Alina Reeves, now promoted to Admiral and serving as humanity's chief ambassador to the Zephyrian Collective, maintained regular contact with Queen Velsarith. Their conversations had evolved from that first profound encounter into an ongoing dialogue about leadership, responsibility, and the challenges of guiding civilizations through complex moral terrain. The Queen had begun, with Alina's encouragement, to share the story of the Talven with younger generations of Zephyrians, ensuring that the tragedy was remembered and studied as a cautionary tale about the dangers of arrogance and unchecked power. The Talven survivors, though small in number, had been offered unprecedented support by the Zephyrian Collective under Queen Velsarith's directive. While many chose to maintain their distance from Zephyrian space, a growing movement within the community had begun engaging in dialogue about reconciliation and memorialization. A monument was being constructed on Talven Core, designed collaboratively by Talven artists, Zephyrian engineers, and human architects, a tribute to those who had been lost and a symbol of the commitment to ensure such tragedies never occurred again. Yuki Tanaka had become the leading expert on Zephyrian culture and language, publishing groundbreaking research on the connections between bioluminescent communication and emotional expression. Marcus Webb continued his medical work, now collaborating with Zephyrian bioengineers on treatments for diseases that affected multiple species. Both remained close friends with Elena, and they often reflected on that extraordinary day when an alien queen had arrived seeking forgiveness and changed the course of history. On the anniversary of their first meeting, Elena received a message from Queen Velsarith. It was brief, but carried the weight of a decade of continued work and reflection. Commander, now Admiral Reeves, 10 years ago you suggested that redemption was a journey rather than a destination. I write to inform you that the journey continues, with its share of difficulties and occasional moments of grace. The Talven delegation has agreed to meet with me for the first time since I took the throne. I do not know what will come of this meeting, but I wanted you to know that your words on that day gave me the courage to continue seeking this moment, however uncertain its outcome. Thank you for bearing witness to my burden and helping me understand that the work of atonement is never finished, but always meaningful. May our two species continue to learn from one another as we navigate the beautiful and terrible complexity of existence among the stars. Elena stood at the observation deck of the new Earth Zephyria diplomatic station, a marvel of combined architectural and biological engineering that served as the symbolic heart of the Alliance. She composed her response with care. Your Majesty, the courage required to face those we have harmed is perhaps the greatest test of character the universe offers. That you continue to choose this path, decade after decade, speaks to the strength that has made you a leader worthy of respect. Whatever comes from your meeting with the Talven delegation, know that humanity stands with you in your commitment to remembrance, accountability, and the endless work of building something better from the ashes of the past. Our species have both learned that we are defined not by our worst moments, but by how we respond to them in all the years that follow. May we continue to walk this path together, across the vast and complicated darkness between the stars. Ntail, as she sent the message and watched it streak across space toward the Zephyrian flagship, Elena reflected on the unexpected gift of that first encounter. Humanity had reached for the stars, expecting to find new worlds, new resources, new opportunities for expansion. Instead, they had found something far more valuable, a mirror held up to their own history, a reminder that the greatest challenges facing any civilization were not technological or military, but moral and ethical. They had found in the confession of an alien queen the universal truth that acknowledging our failures and striving for redemption was not a sign of weakness, but the highest expression of wisdom and strength. The future remained uncertain, full of challenges and opportunities that neither species could fully predict. But humans and Zephyrians would face that future together, bound not by conquest or submission, but by mutual recognition of the weight of history and the shared commitment to ensure that the suffering of the past would serve as a teacher for all the generations yet to come. In the endless expanse of space, where stars were born and died across unimaginable spans of time, two species had found each other and discovered that redemption, healing, and hope were possible, not as destinations to be reached, but as choices to be made again and again across all the years that lay ahead. If this story moved you, please take a moment to leave a like, subscribe for more science fiction narratives, and share in the comments where in the world you're watching from. Your engagement helps us continue bringing you stories that explore the deepest questions of existence, morality, and what it means to be conscious beings navigating the cosmos. Thank you for joining us on this journey across the stars.